Welcome back to the Former AI podcast, where we explore how visionary entrepreneurs are leveraging strategic thinking and cutting-edge approaches to solve critical business problems and drive scale growth. Today, we have a unique guest who is transforming how growing businesses access essential legal expertise. Joining us is Jesse Strauss, the founder of Your Fractional General Counsel, or YFGC. Jesse brings over 2 decades of legal experience, including guiding a tech startup to a successful acquisition, and he's pioneering a modern approach to legal services. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. This is great. Lawyers are not often described as visionary entrepreneurs. Modern. I hope I live up to the hype.
You're a very special case, Jesse. Your company, YFGC, it offers fractional general counsel. You're essentially providing on-demand outsourced legal expertise to startups and small to medium businesses, acting like an in-house resource without the full-time cost. What made you start YFGC?
Yeah, that's a really good explanation of what we do. So YFGC was started out of my experience at 2 different companies. Both were startups in very different spaces. I had, come from a career at law firms, and I had my own little practice for a while. And before that, I worked for the court system. I was a clerk to a federal judge. And, one of the things I realized when I was doing the work for these 2 startups was that although I was very busy and I had a lot going on, a lot of startups didn't necessarily need a full-time legal function. And the skill set that I developed, the different issues we would tackle, were very similar at different companies. I mean, I did 2 of them, and I would talk to all my colleagues at other companies, and it was a lot of the same issues. And so I sort of thought to myself, well, if a lot of these companies don't, need an in-house legal resource, right, but do have some legal work, and that legal work tends to be in a very defined area and a couple of different things, and with some, some little differences here and there, why not be able to provide a service to a variety of different companies, at the same time? As their sort of outsourced in-house legal resource. And that's what we do over at YFGC. So it really, I think that the best businesses are those that are built by people who are solving their own problem. And so I think I was solving a problem that I saw that I had, finding good legal resources at the company, and also that I saw that other people had. So that's what we're trying to do.
Amazing, Jesse. You've mentioned that your deep practical experience, including guiding the tech startup to acquisition, really informs your immersive business-focused counsel approach. How does that background allow you to truly embed with a client's business and tailor legal strategies that make commercial sense rather than just legal sense?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I mean, that's a big part of the service that we're offering, and I think that was part of what was missing when I was working as an in-house, full-time GC. We would hire lawyers and law firms on a project basis, and we would say, hey, we have this agreement that we need done, right? Or we're thinking about this recapitalization of our cap table, or where, we have this employment issue, it could be litigation, whatever it is. And a lot of those firms would sort of parachute in with a lot of resources, right, for that one distinct project. But a lot of the time, they wouldn't have the full understanding of what was happening here. How this fit into our overall strategy, who the players were, what the concerns were. And so at Your Fractional General Counsel, what we try to do is really, like you said, immerse ourselves in the business. We get to know the team, we get to know the strategy. I don't charge for it, but very often I get a lot of emails from clients that aren't necessarily legal problems yet, or might not ever be legal problems, but I'm being kept informed about what's happening at the business, right? And obviously, as their counsel, everything is privileged, so it's okay, or it doesn't have privilege if it's not a legal issue anyway. So they wouldn't, just having me on email doesn't matter. But the fact that I'm learning things, that I'm sort of involved in the strategy, or at least aware of it, I think makes the legal advice that I give when I'm called to give it that much more informed and that much stronger. And from the client's perspective, it's actually less expensive in some ways because I don't have to spend all this time getting up to speed, right, and bill them for that time on something that the whole company knew was happening, or at least the stakeholders knew was happening. So that's a big benefit to using an outsourced, fractional general counsel service.
Right. What were some of the biggest struggles you faced when you started up YFGC? I know I would have initially struggled with the context switching.
Yeah, I mean the actual legal work that I do. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with, and that's not. I mean, sometimes you get a challenging issue, but how to look at the issue and how to really resolve it. Like any business, the challenge is in the client acquisition. It's finding customers, whatever in the tech we say go to market, right? Like that's the term. Where do you find folks who need this particular service, right? Because the service is there, you can do the work, the product is good, the product and service are quite good. And so for me, I was sort of lucky with that, and I had worked with a lot of good people at these startups. The executive team, when we did the acquisition, all went to like different companies, and that formed the core of my client base. I mean, those people had worked with me, they knew me well, and they came back with the legal needs of their companies, and from there you sort of just keep growing your client base. But yeah, I mean that's the biggest challenge is actually that go to market. It's finding the customers, or at least the first couple customers, and then you sort of hope you get a good reputation, and it builds on itself. But yeah, and now, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but now everything is being challenged with AI, just because we're expected and we want to work faster and
Hmm.
cheaper using AI tools, and that's precipitated a lot of sort of revisiting of the model and how we charge folks and how we think about that.
Well, that is a very interesting segue because that was going to be my next question. One of the most fascinating aspects of YFTC is your integration of legal tech tools like Lawyer Loop AI. Could you walk us through that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's we've gone back and forth on this a couple times. I mean, keep in mind that I've been doing the YFGC for 2 years, right? Which has actually corresponded with the explosive growth of AI. So when I got into this business 2 years ago, the AI wasn't in a place that it can actually do legal work. That's
Hmm.
not true anymore, right? The AI actually does very nice legal work. I mean, it needs a lot of guidance. You got to check it carefully, but the work product that it produces is great. And what that does is that puts pressure on us to use those products, which we love to do, but also to use them in a way that accrues to the benefit of the client, not just us, right? It's not just a productivity tool for us. It's actually a way that we can produce the same quality of legal work faster and cheaper, right? Than it was done before. And clients are very aware of that. I mean, the clients themselves have the ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, and they'll put their legal issues in there, and they'll get 90% of the way there, right? And
Hmm.
they know that the lawyers are doing the same thing. So what we try to do is basically all of the matters we work on, we set it up with AI. We have a lot of resources from before AI, right? A lot of good templates, a lot of strong institutional knowledge of how things are done, but we always sort of put an AI layer onto that, right? So, just this morning I have a client that's doing some interesting stuff with managed services in the medical space. And there are a couple agreements that I actually hadn't really worked on in the past. They have agreements that are close to those agreements, but
Hmm.
because it's medicine, there's issues with what's called in New York, at least where I practice generally, the corporate practice in medicine, right? So you have to be very careful about what kind of managed services are offered by one thing and make sure that the practitioners are providing the medical services. And so there's specific clauses that need to be included. All those clauses are available. This isn't, I'm not making anything up from scratch here, but integrating those clauses into pre-existing management agreements for companies, right? Which I have, which you do for a lot of times you do for tax purposes. But integrating those two things together a couple of years ago would have been a challenge. It would have been a day
Mm.
long, project for an associate. Now the AI does it. It's basically it's gonna the clients will get the work in 30% of the time that they used to get it, which is great. I'm excited to do that. However, it does challenge me in some ways because I'm not charging, the same for it. It's a lot less of my time, and lawyers typically bill by the hour. So you could experiment with different things, like you could do flat fees or project-based fees, and those are actually on this one. I am doing a flat fee for that. But then there's always issues of how it works when revisions and different if there's a counterparty negotiations and there's things you can't control, so we have to be careful. And I think that part of the business, I mean, the AI being applied to the law is something that, it's going to happen and everyone's doing it. How you bill for it, right? How you monetize it, and how you both provide a faster, cheaper legal service for your clients, and also, maintain your profit margins is the big challenge and for me in the long run.
Yeah. Would you say that's your biggest concern with AI in the current legal industry and the environment around the current legal industry?
Is that my biggest concern?
Hmm.
I mean, for my business, that's the biggest concern. I mean, in the long run, there's a lot of ways this, that the business can change. I mean, one of the things obviously is that's really interesting is, and I've written about this, is outside investment in law firms. Right now in the United States, not so in other places. I don't know the rules in Australia, but in the United States, every state except Utah and Arizona, only lawyers can own law firms, right? So that's interesting because it means that outside investors, tech investors, right? And also the talent that might come along with that in terms of marketing and obviously, developers and the tech and stuff. Those people can't have equity in your legal business.
I
And so,
see.
yeah, so what that does is it makes it harder to hire. For example, if I said, well, I'm going to grow YFGC into $1 billion company, I'm not. But if I wanted to do that, for example, and I said I want to attract a top marketer, right, to get everything out there, I can pay them out of my pocket, right, or I can, take a loan or something. But I can't take VC money to do that, and I can't give them equity in the company because they're not a lawyer, right? And in theory, if they had equity, they'd be making money from. I'd be fee splitting. I'd be taking the money I make on the law and giving part of it to this non-lawyer.
I
And so,
see.
that's a big issue. And so, but on the flip side, once you allow that to happen, and they're experimenting with it in Arizona, for example, once you allow non-lawyer ownership of law firms, all the lawyers like me generally become employees of these law firms. We no longer own our own businesses. It's another way to sort of platform lawyers. So there's a lot of tension. How that plays out, I don't know. I look at it from the legal business perspective. There's a lot of people who look at it from the client perspective, and they say, well, if lawyers are taking money from people from outside investors, then they're not only working for the client, right? Which is
Hmm.
our relationship is just with the client. That's the only way we make our money. We don't get paid by some, big outside investor. And then there's questions about conflicts of interest and whether you're truly working for the client, you work for the company, things like that. So, all those are open questions. So that's to me a little tangent. It's not tangential. It's all related, but it's not exactly on point. That's the thing with AI because now, if you know that the tech can do the legal work, which it can, right? You have a little less of a justification for why only lawyers should own that tech, right? And once you let the big tech companies own the tech and employ lawyers, it's a bit of a different situation. And so that's the long run. In the short run, my concern is just, leveraging AI to do work faster, cheaper for the clients and also be able to make money doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important is this client-centric approach in today's market, especially for fast-moving startups who they can't afford delays or unpredictable legal bills? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, and that's one of the reasons I think the model is catching on. A lot of startups are working on a limited budget. They do have a lot of investment, but that investment certainly wasn't made so they could pay their legal bills. It was made so that they can they can expand, they can grow. So yeah, so everyone, all the folks I deal with are very cost conscious, and one of the things that your fractional counsel model lets you do is manage your legal bills in a way that perhaps hiring a lawyer on a project basis doesn't.
Amazing. Looking ahead, what's your vision for YFGC for the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, right now, we're doing what we're doing, and
Hmm.
and we're doing it successfully. AI is challenging it, like I said, so things are changing rapidly. I want to lean into Lawyer Loop a bit. So the original idea with YFGC and Lawyer Loop are same company, but they don't really we don't play up the Lawyer Loop part as much as we should. When the AI first came out, let's say 2 years ago or even a year ago at this point, it moved so quickly. The idea was that there would be a market for legal services offered directly AI offering legal services to clients. So in other words, the client would just like go online, do the legal work. There'd be no human lawyer involved. And so, Lawyer Loop was a way to sort of lean into that. We said, well, there will be a lawyer sort of marginally involved, but most people are just going to do their own legal work using AI, and we'll figure out a way to charge for that. I think that there's been a change of the way of the thinking in that in the last year or so. As good as the AI is, most clients or most people who can afford it at least do want a human lawyer, guiding the work, right? So right now we're using AI, to supplement the work of the lawyers, right? Make it faster and cheaper. We're not having anyone do their own legal work with AI, and I don't think we're going to go back there. The thing with what I'm excited about with Lawyer Loop is the idea that somebody can go on to the website. They can't do it yet, but they will be vibe code this, so they say, or find someone to vibe code it, with me, and basically put in their legal matter, right, and get back something usable, but not quite all the way there, and
Hmm.
also something that points them in the direction of the lawyer who can handle this, right? Now the law is it's a very specialized field, right? So somebody's going to go to Lawyer Loop AI and say, I have this. I have a brand, right, that I haven't done anything to protect in, anywhere in the world. I'm in the UK, right? And I need somebody in the UK who can do this, right? And then, the Lawyer Loop, the AI will get you to a certain place, explain what you need, explain the different, ways that it's done, right? Some of the basics about, intellectual property protection in the UK, and hopefully it'll be up to date, and it'll explain how Brexit has affected that and whatnot. And then say, here is a lawyer who uses AI to
Hmm.
produce, a faster, cheaper solution for you, right? Without sacrificing quality. And if you want, tell us and we'll contact that lawyer, and then they're probably sleeping or whatever, but they're not ready then, but you'll be able to arrange a meeting with the lawyer. So it's that type of vision, right? Where somebody goes into AI, as every client does, uses the AI to basically get the basics on their legal issue, which every client does, but they know that there's a lawyer there that can then help them if they want to sign up with a lawyer. So that would be the vision of what I'd like to be doing with Lawyer Loop AI, in the next year or so.
Next year or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going even further ahead, where do you see YFTC in the next 3 to 5 years?
In the next 3 to 5 years, I mean, I see us as the go-to resource for any company. I think the biggest companies in the world, let's say like the 1,000 biggest companies in the world, they don't care. They'll pay for, a very overpriced lawyer at a big firm, and the general counsel there, as I've been, is going to say it's worth it because I'm paying for outcomes, and I, cover your ass. Like we owe it to the shareholders in our
Yeah.
huge company to get, the most expensive, best lawyer possible. And that's a great business if you can be in that and be at one of those, let's say there's 200 firms in the world that'll service those 1,000 clients, maybe even 100. I don't know the industry as well as I used to in that way, but that's not going to change, right? Those clients are not price sensitive. There is a thought, somebody said this to me the other day, which I thought was really interesting, is that it will change over time, right? As the leadership changes and the clients, they're going to demand, their law firms change as well. But that's like a 20-year process, right? As that happens, maybe 10-year process. But for everybody who's not in that, sort of top tier, right? The very rich people serving even richer people, right? Which to me just isn't exciting. Like I don't live in that world. I don't want to live in that world. It's not where I function. The 99% of other legal customers out there, especially businesses, to have an outsourced legal resource that they can go to, that they can sign up with, to be their first stop for almost all their legal work, right? And if that legal resource is empowered with AI to be able to, cover a lot of different areas, right? And do it well, do it faster, cheaper without sacrificing quality. That's where I want, YFGC to be positioned.
Got it, Jesse. Amazing. What's something that we need to talk about, but we haven't talked about yet?
We've covered a lot here. I think that the ownership issue, which I touched on earlier, I know we already covered it, is a huge issue for how AI is going to develop in the legal space. I think there's a lot of experimentation right now. There's a lot of these new model law firms that are popping up, which are technically owned by lawyers, and they're putting AI first before the
Hmm.
lawyer. I saw one today that the value prop was, 80% AI, 20% lawyer. I'm not sure. It's to be decided. I liken it, and it could be totally wrong, but I liken it to the way we have all the software that does your bookkeeping now. I could, if I wanted to, I could do the books myself using QuickBooks. I do employ a bookkeeper, right? I mean, they're not, they're fractional. I do have a bookkeeper, right? And it's because I do law. I don't want to do accounting. I don't want to do
Bookkeeping. Yeah.
bookkeeping. Okay, right. So, the issue with the AI, right, is whether or not, people are going to say, well, there's all this software out there and there's all this ability I know, right, to go to directly to the AI or to this, new mod law firm that's 80% AI, 20% lawyer, whatever that might mean, right? And do the legal work myself, low touch, never really talk to a lawyer, you know, versus, right, which would be me using QuickBooks all the time, versus sort of a higher touch model where I have a question, I ask the bookkeeper, I send the bookkeeper my receipts, I send the bookkeeper, different things that the invoices, my accounts receivable and things like my accounts payable, things like that. Whether the AI is going to make everybody into a lawyer or whether you're going to have the lawyers using AI to provide the service faster and cheaper. And that's the question. I've pretty much landed for myself on the solution, right? That we're gonna have lawyers, in the loop, right? In the lawyer loop, and we're gonna really, lean into the human lawyer on this stuff. But it's an open question, really, about how that's going to play out. It really is, So we'll see. I like it, I like the fact that the future is unwritten,
Hmm.
and I think that I'm not a great entrepreneur, but I'm somebody who has an appetite for risk and taking chances and adapting, and also the tenacity and the grit, right, to do that. And I think that the future belongs to lawyers who have that grit, right, to power through, find new ways to do things, not be wed to old models, and not always put their bottom line at the expense of what they could do potentially for the client, doing more with less.
Amazing, Jesse. That is really, really insightful. I thank you so much for sharing all these valuable insights. It's been incredibly enlightening to learn from you. I can't wait to see the heights that YFTC reaches. And I truly believe that your model is a blueprint for the future legal services. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so pretty easy. It's there's a you can I'm on LinkedIn, Jesse Strauss. You can also go to your fractionalgc.com. That's our website, and Jesse at your fractional GC. GC being two letters. I'm pretty easy to
Amazing.
find. Yeah,
Great.
and I'd
Thanks,
love
Jesse.
to hear from folks. Yeah, I do consultations too. I love giving out legal advice.
Perfect. Well, we really appreciate your time and effort on this. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Great, cool. Thanks a lot. Good luck with everything. Bye.